My name is Angella Fraser, and my company is Headspace NC. It is a company that is designed for flexibility. The most important thing that I want to do with my company is to give Black women voice, and that could be in so many areas. I hold courageous conversations about diversity in my home, bring women in to hear from Black women about the issues that are controversial, but they need to be talked about. We've talked about what happened in Charlottesville. We talked about uh, all of the politics and people's opinions about our hair, all types of topics. The way that the Rhythm Wigs aspect of the company came into being is because Black women have a very special relationship with our hair. And I wanted to kind of own that. I wanted to own that that's important. And it is hair, but for Black women, its hair is important, super important.
In a way that white people
In a way
generally
that
don't understand or can't understand.
it's not understood. It cannot be, as you said. Our hair is political. However we decide to wear our hair, we're making a statement about who we are. I don't think that that is the same in other communities. Our hair has been politicized. There have been laws about whether we can wear our hair covered or not. There has been, just on the positive side, a lot of our history is around how our hair represents our status. Our hair is one of the most unique aspects about our humanity, right?
Would you mind sharing a personal story that you shared with me before about, didn't you get terminated from a job?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. In my early 20s, I was a recent college graduate from an Ivy League university in engineering. And I went to work one day with braids in my hair. And I was called aside by my manager and told that I would have to come in the next day with my hair in a different style, without braids. And I thought about it, and I came in with the same hairstyle the next day. I was called into HR. And the affront and the insult on top of the injury in HR, what the woman said to me is that the evidence that my hairstyle was inappropriate for the workplace was the fact that Bo Derek, I don't know if you remember at the time, there was this movie called 10. Dustin Hoffman, I think, was the guy, and Bo Derek. And she ran on the beach. She was a 10, the perfect woman. And she ran on the beach in a bathing suit with her hair in braids with beads. And what the HR person said to me is that that was evidence that it was a casual hairstyle and unprofessional. The affront, on top of the fact that I was getting fired, was the fact that I would have associated that hairstyle with Cicely Tyson or with the women that I see in different countries in Africa, the women that I saw growing up in Bed-Stuy, not in this white woman who appropriated the hairstyle, and now it's used to attack what I decide culturally is appropriate to wear to work. And so that's so layered. As you know, from your reaction, I can see that you see some of those layers. That this was evidence to her, in her world, her only exposure likely to something that was culturally African, was used to make decisions about an employee. And it was so off. And I did sue the company on my own. I asked my mother to not get involved. I wanted to really have my own voice. My mother was a very strong activist in our community in Jamaica, for the poor, for the underserved. And so I really wanted to have my own voice. I was in my early 20s, as I said, and so I took the case to the EEOC and I won the case. And I did not get reinstated. I did not want to, but I did get back pay. And it's a story that I hadn't really kept on the surface. I experienced it and I learned from it, And I didn't realize until more recently how much it impacted my decision. It was a part of the story, the thread of my life that led me to start this custom wig line called Rhythm Wigs. My experience in corporate in general is that there were always times where the way that I wore my hair, and I'm not talking about wearing purple or rainbow colored hair, became something that was so important in my evaluating whether I was going to get promoted, whether I was going to be seen as who I am. I'm fair skinned, I used to wear my hair straight. And I realized that some people didn't know that I was Black. They questioned, I had this kind of a little bit of accent sometimes, depending on my mood. And I made a decision that I wanted them to know who I was. I wanted my people to be credited for my success. I wanted to be seen in that group of women. I didn't want to be some kind of, what is the term? When you can't make a distinction between what I wanted to be clear about who I was. And so I decided because of that I was going to grow locks. And so I stopped chemically processing my hair, which is another layer that we may get into, because there's so much about that and what that says about the woman, whether it's because you want to look white or whether it's because, or it's just another style option that we had as Black women. We can rock all kinds of hairstyles, and still look amazing. And timing that decision to grow locks, I timed it around when I decided to leave banking. And so I mention that because hair is such a big part of major things that happen to Black women. I didn't change my hair until I got a job offer at the tech company that I then spent the next 16 years at.
Until you felt the freedom.
Until I felt the freedom. And the freedom came when I decided how to present myself on the application. I really decided that I was going to be as open as possible in who I really am. I spoke about, emotional intelligence and not just the IQ and things like that. I really wanted them to see who I was and choose me because of that. And when they did, I thought I could be fully myself, and they would see however I represented myself as a good reflection of the company, its values, its emphasis on innovation, on creativity, on authenticity, and those types of things.
Let me stop you right now for just
Sure.
to say where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Now your necklace is
Oh.
torturing my microphone just a little bit as it's settled in, so I'm going to move that up just a little tiny bit. That'll be fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, one of the through lines so far that I've heard that it really makes sense for us to kind of chase down is how Black women's hair itself is a means of communication.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. The podcast, Communications Breakdown, what we're trying to do is dive into how people talk and effectively communicate with each other,
Right.
about each other, through each other. And you're describing a relationship that as a white cis male, I can't begin to kind of get I can get my mind around it, but I can't, the lived experience just isn't there.
Right.
So talk a little bit more, if you could, about how communications, and you already have given great insight into this, but how stylistically what y'all do with your hair
Sure.
is communicating.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Well, I'll just talk about the decision on what wig I would wear today. I've got all the wigs to choose from, and all of my wigs are in the kinky curly line. I don't have, kind of the bone straight wigs. But really, in deciding how I was going to present myself on this interview, my hair was a big part of that. It was the hair that decided what t-shirt I would wear, or whether I would wear just a white shirt or anything like that. I wanted to project that I was confident in my Blackness. I wanted to present that my voice matters, and I want to be listened to. If I were standing and walking into a room, there is a different way that I would walk when I wear my hair this way.
You
You
say
know,
all of those things
it,
with your choice
all
of
of
hair.
it, all of it, all of it is said through our hair. If you think about the Black Power movement, when even in the Black community, wearing our hair natural was shunned, right? Because we have been socialized just like everyone else to believe that straight hair, good hair, as we call it in our community, hair that is closer to the European standards is what we call good hair. Um, there was, especially for older folks at the time, wearing your hair natural, wearing your hair in an afro was a political act that your grandmother, your mother may have thought was the worst thing you could do, because they're thinking about how are you going to get a job with your hair like that? How are you going to support your family with your hair like that? Imagine that. And so when I wear this hair, what I am communicating without question is that all of that I embrace. I embrace who I am. I embrace my story, my opinions. I embrace you because you are accepting of the way that I look. I've met you once before. You kind of know my vibe. You're back. And so, and I'm respecting your audience because I am imagining that when this video is released, that you have an audience that is accepting of me and not just tolerating, but embracing who I am.
Well, let's talk. That's a great segue into something else that you do, and you mentioned it briefly earlier. But it's called for this new audience of yours, if there is one here, Head Talks.
Right.
And the point of this, well, you can take it where you will. Talk
Sure.
about it. Yeah.
So Head Talks is an acronym. Highlight, embrace, and advance diversity is, and it's just something that a friend and I came up with because my company is Headspace NC. And what I wanted to do is create a safe space for difficult conversations to happen. Um, I know that controversy is hard, but I believe it's necessary because I think it's when we avoid conflict that we have more conflict, and we have disruptive conflict or destructive conflict when we avoid it. And so I wanted to create a space, for example, where if, white women are in the room and we're talking about hair, they can ask questions about my hair. Without feeling awkward. They may feel awkward. We're not trying to avoid that awkward. We actually want to push, because that's where the learning happens. Right on that edge of discomfort is where a lot of learning takes place. If you choose to go there, you grow, right? And so we do want to take people there, but I also want to say go there and feel comfortable and learn from it and take it back to whatever space you find yourself in, right? Ask those questions in this space. Some of the topics that we cover, we do ask whether a safe word is required because we've talked about intersectionality and gender and identity and things like that also. And two of my children are in the LGBTQIA community, and so they led that discussion. And it was important for that group of people to have a word, a safe word, if for whatever reason they were feeling uncomfortable. And it so happened in this little segue that there was someone in the audience who was not in that community who felt that she was too uncomfortable to stay, and I graciously escorted her out, told her she was welcome to come back, but again, I am not trying to avoid those things, right? So Head Talks really came out of the same idea that women like me, Black women, we are, I think, the most inclusive group of people. We are community. It's just who we are. And I wanted to create a space where we could create that community and everyone could come in and talk about the things that matter, hard things, funny things, and for people to leave. The only objective that I have in my head talks is for people to leave a little different, with a little different thinking than they had, and they take it back to their circles. I'm not trying to have any big changes in minds. If you had a perspective about, oh, black women are angry, or our hair is this, or why is it a big deal? You come, we talk about it, and then you leave. And when you're having those conversations with other people, or you find yourself, in situations where you'll have something to say that comes from a real knowing, and not that single black friend that you may have, that has one opinion, and you think that one opinion is the whole community. Well, come to the community where there are other. It's not only for women, but again, I think that when things are designed with black women as a core, everyone is invited.
I love that. Let me ask for folks who might be interested in either participating in a head talk or learning from you a little bit more or doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have just some insight for how they might get something like this going? Because again, with communications as a through line,
Right.
how do you get the word out to the people who need to hear the message?
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine any number of your
Mm-hmm.
friends would want to come and just hang out, and but that can quickly devolve into a wine drinking session where you're just bitching about your men and whatever. But,
Right.
But talk about how you get the word to the people who need to be here to help make the impact that you want to make.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should ask that question, because head talks have been on hiatus for a few months. One of the reasons for that, the primary reasons for that, is because fewer people who I really wanted the message to get to were getting it, even though I had widened the net in terms of how I communicated. Initially, it was friends of friends of friends, and my circle of friends and associates are hugely multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-faith. And I'm not sure if it's because of the political climate or things like that, but I did open the net. Even my Facebook postings were now made public. I broadened it to my local community here. And I was finding that it was the people who, in my sense of things, already knew. Did not. It was a choir that I was preaching to. You know what I mean? Even though I wasn't the speaker in all of these things.
So that became a problem.
So it is. It has become a problem, and I've been thinking about how to address that. And one way that is sticking is maybe collaborating with other groups, because I do see that there are other groups who are trying to do similar things, and maybe being in collaboration with them, the message can get out further. And I think that's gonna stick. It's, for me, a lot of what I do is spirit led. It's energy. It's feeling. I think feelings are data. I come from IT, and so I think feelings are important and valuable as much as a statistic. Feelings can be turned into statistics. Feelings can be codified. So feelings are important. So I'm leaning towards collaborating with other organizations that are doing similar things, small scale, not anything huge, but at the core, that we do not avoid controversy, that we create spaces where we can talk about the things that are important to talk about.
Because I think the lesson of your life appears to be the conversations can make a huge difference.
They are the thing that makes the difference, really. Think about it. What it's how the fact that we have linguistics, we have language,
communication.
That's just what it is. I mean, it is the way that change happens, and so it's where and with whom and how and all of that, those details. But communication is the core of any change that you want to see. You have to talk to each other, I mean, and you can do it this way too. And, there's sign language, absolutely. But again, that's a form of communication, right? Even talking with your hands. So, yeah.
Well, I really value your time today. Thank you. I mean, we could talk for another 5 hours, but we'll leave it there for today, and
Sure.
we'll come back to you in season 2.
Awesome. Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much.
me.
Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate
really
it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Terrific.
As you know from working in as a media, but mainly as a writer, if you think of writing as newspapermen, which my daddy was, you go and watch a very complicated situation, and then you have to boil it down to maybe 5 paragraphs. You're with your lead and your closing and all of that. And my own view is that newspapermen, newspaper people, I should say, either are some of the sanest people in the world, or else they go nuts. It's a very, it's like teaching. You're out there on the front lines and you see all kinds of stuff, and the question is how to generalize some complicated stuff into something that makes sense. And from working with poor people and black people you have to say the two things separate, because quite a few black people aren't poor, but they also are oppressed just because of their race. My wife and where I live with my black family, I wouldn't say we're poor, but I can feel Linda's in the background.
Yeah.
She just disagreed with me, but
That's fine.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't go to bed hungry. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But you can feel it just walking down the street, And I'm a white male lawyer, and I can feel the hate for me and stuff. So
Al, that's a terrific segue into something I did want to talk to you about, and that's this notion of being such a powerful advocate for the black community and people of color, but being a white warrior and still at the end of the day going home to a community and being a white guy walking through it, whether it's in your supermarket, your church, wherever, your bank, wherever you are, you're the white guy, and people don't look at you the same way. Whether you're the most powerful advocate in the world, you don't have that lived experience outside of your entire life's experience, but you've had to seek it out. It hasn't sought you out, and there is a difference.
Well,
or there seems to be a difference. Let me rephrase the question. Is there a difference?
Well, I think, the problem is that there's stereotyping that goes on. I mean, certainly a lot of our black brothers and sisters, if they don't know me or they see me with a Linda, they have a double take, and then if they see her smiling or hold my hand or everything, either they say that lucky dog got that beautiful woman, or they say, it can't be all bad if she likes him, right? So, and then, the onus is on me to, earn the trust of people.
But digging a little deeper, for you personally, do you feel any kind of push and pull internally for the idea that, there was a great book I read when I was very young, probably way too young to understand it, and I'm sure you know it, Black Like Me. Do you know the book Black Like Me?
Yeah.
Right.
Jim Griff.
Yeah, a remarkable book, but one that is so unnerving and unsettling by today's standards, where the author literally takes a particular chemical and turns his skin black, just to paint the picture for folks a little bit, and goes and tries to live in the community and experience what it was like to be black in the 60s in America in a way that no white person could. Do you get the sense, is there still some sense of that for you, that Are you missing anything, or have you just lived it at this point for 83 years and you're like, fuck off, guy, for the question? Am I insulting you with the question? But can you speak to that at all?
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with my history, because my history that you can see, which I think Cash Michaels tried to get in the movie, Al, my brother, was that I was always white, proud to be white, proud to be Irish, Scotch-Irish, or whatever my history is. Most proud of being my daddy was a newspaper man. That's why I was most proud of that. And I was proud of my mother and her radical Christianity, or that Jesus and justice meant exactly the same thing. So if you start from that, I never felt guilty or whatever that I was white.
You weren't trying to fit in.
Ideas like that I think are bullshit, actually. And I'm not too sure about some of these ideas about white skin privilege. What I would like for white people to be happy with who they are and see, just from common sense and logic, if not from their heart, how important it is to dismantle racism, because racism holds both races down. And clearly, with Trump in there, using black people as like Jesse Helm used gay people. You remember how he used the F word rather than N word? He started out with the N word on WRAL every night, and then he changed it to the F word. That's Jesse Helm. And Trump uses immigrants or Mexicans or whatever, or Latinos.
Yeah, same dog whistles.
As his N-word now. And if good Scotch-Irish and Middle East people and Asian people and all kinds of other people who are not black necessarily, or can't understand how that is, that idea of scapegoating, somebody who is either not as well off as you are, or who happens to look different than you are. Those are Trump's two favorite things. That's stupid. That's no way to run. That just is not only inhumane and un-Christian or un-Muslim or un-Jewish or whatever. It's on every major religion. But it also is no way to run a government, no way to run, if you say a government is an attempt to organize society in such a way that people can, lead a happy life. That's all a government is try to lead some kind of just, fair society, that people don't screw each other and kill each other. That's what the job of the government is.
Yeah, it is the social contract. I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
It's a great way to kind of bring this to a close and wrap it up. I mean, the podcast is called Communications Breakdown. You've just described the breakdown that we've experienced in our society. How do you bring it back for folks who want to advocate and do the right thing and be allies, but maybe not, who are part of the demographic that they want to be an ally for? How do you talk about that, and how do you suggest people communicate on behalf of people in an ally way when they're not part of that demographic?
Well, my prescription is fairly simple. It is to make friends. I don't like the term allies. I like the term brothers and sisters. I mean, if you say your goal is to become part of the human family, which has brothers and sisters and cousins or whatever, obviously that doesn't happen immediately. But I bet of all your listeners, those who have black friends from the same class they are, whatever, if they're middle class or college class or, high school class or whatever, if they've made some good black friends, they should do extra work to keep up with those friends. It takes a little time to change your friendship circles, but the closer friends you have that are black, when some creep drives 8 hours to El Paso and aims to kill people of color, the more your empathy will be with those families. I mean, you will feel like that he's killing your cousins. That's the way I felt every time I heard this asshole, pull the trigger on them, and particularly the kids and the families the parents that jumped in front of their kids to try to save them and stuff like that. I cry every time I think about it. And it's because I have a whole lot of Mexican friends. I know people who have come from Mexico and have not necessarily walked that long walk up from Guatemala and places, but have made a go of it here in the United States and are more patriotic than I am.
Yeah, of course. We all have those friends.
My advice to people is to make friends with somebody who comes from one of these categories that Trump hates and scapegoats, and so that you will feel it in your own bones, just like they do. Whenever one of Trump's tropes that he pulls all the time is acted out by some crazy person.
Yeah, and to your point, in so many ways, for all of the fighters and activists and advocates out there, communications is at the heart of what they do. But what you're talking about is far more basic and far more fundamental. It's just love in your heart.
Yeah, well, it's if you say really love, particularly if you say psychologists say the only difference between the human species and say a fairly well-developed orangutan is the ability to talk. And they say that orangutans, if you work on them long enough, they can even talk a little bit. And the ones that can talk with each other actually have a more fun life. In other words, the talk is what makes life fun. That's what, if you've ever been in love with anybody, which, as you know from my movie, I have. You know that talking, hanging out with your lover or your wife or your mate or whoever is, and talking with them is one of the best things in the whole world.
Best way to find and express your love. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you very much. That's a great place to leave it. Really appreciate your time.
I've seen radical transformational change during my lifetime, having grown up in the segregated South and seen what it was like to be in the forefront of desegregating our schools, desegregating public accommodations and restaurants and the like. So I lived in a world when I was growing up where you saw that apartheid on a day-to-day basis, and you felt that discrimination when you were in those classrooms, when people looked at you and thought of you as nothing more than a glorified monkey who didn't have the intelligence to perform, to articulate your ideas, and you really didn't deserve to be there. But at the same time, I've lived through the radical transformational change that has occurred during my lifetime. I'm 66 years old. So, through the Civil Rights Act, through the Voting Rights Act, through the fair housing laws and everything that came along with it. I saw as a child watching, hundreds of Klansmen walk down through the streets of downtown Durham, even after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, because they feared change. And unfortunately, I think you see a resurgence of people who now feel that change is upon them. I think some of that occurred, unfortunately, as a result of the election of President Obama. I think people felt that they were losing their country in some respects, and somehow were losing power or influence, as the case may be, and it led to a resurgence and a backlash of white nationalism. And unfortunately, it has continued to grow and thrive as opposed to subsiding. And I don't think our current president has done anything except exacerbate that process. He's made it worse, not made it better. He's been more divisive than anything else, and certainly has fed hostilities in a way that they have not been fanned by a president or a leader of our country in my entire lifetime. So I mean, I think we have to overcome, even leadership at the highest levels in our country, to think about the America we want to be, to think about what it means to be good citizens that are co-equal in this world, and to epitomize the best that America can offer for everyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of their gender identity. All of the above. I mean, and people, we have to be aspirational in what we seek. We can't succumb to the prejudices or biases that many of us have growing up in a world where things are far less than perfect. But I think that the fact that Obama was elected says a lot about how far America has come. People are not always comfortable talking about race. They're not able to wrestle with their own feelings. I think if they reflect, they probably find some degree of ambivalence within themselves on occasions, regardless of their race, whether they're black or white or Asian or whatever that race may be. So I mean, I think that we have to begin to talk openly and substantively about our attitudes, our views, and perspective about race, and understand that it's okay if we have feelings that don't necessarily conform to what society says that they should be, in terms of us being completely and totally colorblind in our approach to issues, in our approach to people, our approach to policies, because very few people have that degree of neutrality. Some do, but there are many of us who don't. I think the thing that we have to understand is that there has to develop a mutual respect for all people, and also for the differences within people. We're not a monolithic block of all blacks or all whites, all Latinos or all Asians. There are differences within each and every group, but there has to be a mutual respect of those differences. I think our communities of faith, our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, to play a role in that, in pulling people of divergent backgrounds together to understand their different philosophies about the world, but more importantly, to bring them together under one umbrella of humanity. It would be good to be able to get more communication with our schools in a way that is that doesn't conflict in terms of causing any one group to feel as if they are less equal than others, or one is more inferior and one is more superior. It would be great if we could do an awful lot within fraternities and sororities and groups and organizations, even political organizations, that recognize the fact that this is a issue of national perspective that deserves to be approached on a number of fronts simultaneously, and it's not going to be any one thing that does it, but collectively it can happen, even on a neighbor-to-neighbor basis, to reach out, to speak, to talk to somebody who may not be like you, who may be completely different from you, but to be able to talk in a logical, calm, reasonable way without developing negative perceptions because of whatever our intrinsic values may be.
It all comes down to talking to each other then.
Talking to each other. Mutual respect. But more importantly, mutual respect of differences. We have to have mutual respect of each other's differences, and get to the point where no one group feels as if they're superior to the other, understanding that we're all in this world together. That when we gave birth, the color and complexion of our skin was simply based upon a coincidence of timing of who our parents happened to be.